there, fellow diver. Ready to explore some depths, but maybe not the depths you're thinking of.
Not just the deep blue this time.
Exactly. We're going below the surface of human behavior in scuba diving.
And trust me, there's a lot lurking down there.
Yeah.
We often get so focused on the gear.
All the gadgets.
Yeah, all of that we kind of forget about the most critical element.
The human in the water.
Yeah, ourselves.
It's like that saying, right? The most dangerous thing on a scuba dive is the nut behind the mask.
You got it.
But today, we're going to unpack that with a little help from diving safety expert Gareth Locke and his book, Under Pressure.
Oh, great book.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Real life stories, research, all the good stuff.
It's fascinating. It's really diving deep into like the psychology of diving and how things like stress, tunnel vision, even like social pressure can lead to,
Oh, wow.
errors in judgment, even for like the most experienced divers out there.
Yeah, it's not just about nailing that buoyancy control or having like the shiniest new dive computer.
It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gareth, he really highlights the importance of what he calls non-technical skills.
Okay.
Things like communication, teamwork, leadership, decision-making.
Yeah.
Especially under pressure.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back to a dive I had. I think we were exploring a wreck off the coast somewhere, and the visibility, it just tanked.
Oh.
It went from, crystal clear to pea soup in seconds.
Wow.
And I felt this wave of anxiety, like it just washed over me, and I totally blanked on the hand signals.
Oh, no.
We had just reviewed like minutes before getting in the water.
Wow.
Thankfully, my buddy, he stayed calm, and we were able to use, some basic signals to get back to the ascent line safely.
Yeah.
But it was just a real reminder for me that, even with all the right training, the equipment, sometimes your brain just kind of...
Yeah, it goes out the window.
Yeah, it does.
It's like your brain is on vacation, but you're not.
Exactly.
It can happen to anyone, those brain farts, we'll call them.
Yeah.
Regardless of experience.
Yeah.
Remember that story in the book about the diver who almost died because he forgot to repack his rebreather scrubber?
Wait, what? How do you even forget something like that? That's like what keeps you alive.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh.
So he'd seen that the canister lid was open when he was gearing up, but in the rush to get in the water, and, maybe he was focused on keeping up this, like, perfect safety record he thought he had.
Oh, wow.
Just that stress, that tunnel vision,
Yeah.
That desire to keep up appearances, it clouded his judgment.
Yeah. It's a chilling reminder that we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
We all make mistakes.
Absolutely.
No matter how careful we are.
You got it. And that's why, understanding these human factors, it's so important. It's about moving beyond just saying human error.
Right.
And actually understanding like what leads to that? Like what's the chain of events, the mental processes?
So being more aware of like our own limitations and really how our brains work.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially in, stressful situations, almost like training our brains for diving as much as our bodies.
Exactly. And another part of this is what Gareth calls the illusion of certainty.
Yeah.
So often we approach diving with this plan the dive the plan mentality.
Of course, yeah. You don't just jump in the water without a plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the underwater world, it doesn't really follow a script.
Oh, tell me about it. I remember one time, anyone listening who's jumped off a cliff into the ocean for a dive, will get this. You take that plunge, you're expecting this gentle current to carry you toward, your exit point. And I ended up getting swept in the opposite direction. It was so disorienting. It was powerful.
Yeah. And that's a great example of why we need what we call situational awareness.
Okay.
It's that ability to really assess your surroundings, to recognize when conditions are changing, because they always do, and then, being able to adapt your plan.
So how do we actually cultivate that? It's easy to just say, be more aware.
Yeah.
But what are some practical steps we can take?
Well, for starters, it's about being present, like really in the moment, not just going through the motions, which is easier said than done, but it's about really scanning your surroundings, checking those gauges, knowing where your buddy is, what their air consumption is like.
Okay.
And just always being prepared for the unexpected. We can dive into some more specific techniques.
Oh, I'd love to. This is really making me think about past dives in a whole new light and think about some things maybe I've missed.
Absolutely.
It's like you get so locked in on your plan that you forget to actually like look around and see what's happening.
Totally. We forget to engage with that dynamic environment. And that's where things can go wrong.
And that's where we can get into some trouble.
And that's where those consequences come in, yeah.
Yeah. And that leads us perfectly into this whole idea of learning from mistakes, which Gareth really emphasizes in Under Pressure. Like he shares some pretty intense stories.
Yeah, he does.
Of diving mishaps. We're talking tangled lines, equipment malfunctions, even like those heart-stopping near drowning experiences.
It's true. It's, and what's powerful about those stories is he doesn't just say, this is what happened.
Right.
It's the why.
Right. And the why is so important.
And he does a great job of unraveling that often hidden chain of events.
Yeah.
The subtle ways that our brains can betray us under stress or when we're tired.
Yeah.
Or even when we're, just plain excited, you know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You get caught up in the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And then those things happen.
It's like those forensic crime shows.
Okay, yeah.
Where they have to like retrace the steps, you know, to really understand what happened.
Totally.
It's not just about the event itself. It's about everything that led to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like take for example, the story of Tim. He's he's an experienced researcher.
Okay.
And he ends up losing this hydrophone during a dive.
Oh, okay.
He's dealing with a leaky mask. He's under pressure to collect this data for his wife's research project.
Oh, no.
And in that moment of distraction, boom, the hydrophone, it's gone.
I can feel the panic like rising just thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like losing something underwater is like a whole
it's the worst.
Other level.
It's awful.
But here's what gets me. His buddy misses it too.
I know.
How is that even possible? You'd think a missing piece of equipment.
I know, but
it'd be like
it happens more often than you think. And that's because of this thing called authority gradient.
Okay.
So in this case, Tim is the more experienced diver,
right?
And his buddy is also his employee, right?
Okay.
So you have this dynamic where there's this tendency to defer to the authority figure.
Okay.
Even when something seems off, even when you're like, I swear that hydrophone was just there.
Wow. So you've got this double whammy of stress impairing judgment and then the authority gradient that's kind of preventing.
Yeah, preventing that open communication.
Yeah.
Which we know is so key, especially when you're underwater.
It makes you realize how important it is to like create a dive culture where anyone, regardless of experience, feels comfortable voicing their concerns.
100%. And that's where this whole concept of a just culture comes in, which Gareth talks about in the book.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me more about that.
So imagine like a diving community where we don't stigmatize mistakes.
Okay.
But we actually look at them as learning opportunities. You know?
Okay. So instead of like pointing fingers
and
assigning blame, it's about trying to understand why those mistakes happen.
Absolutely.
And how to prevent them from happening again.
Exactly. A just culture is about like creating that safe space for reporting errors without punishing people.
Okay.
And that just leads to this more open, honest approach to safety, which is what we all want.
Right. I mean, it makes you think how many like near misses or even potentially dangerous situations go unreported.
Totally.
Because people are afraid of, I don't know, like losing their certifications or getting kicked out of dive groups or even facing like legal action.
It's huge. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Wow.
Because it prevents us from actually learning from those mistakes, which is the whole point.
Right.
Like Gareth actually, he shares this story about a dive safety officer at a university.
Okay.
Who is really struggling to create this just culture.
Oh, okay.
And unfortunately, you know, a student almost drowns because of a poorly planned dive.
Oh, no.
Inadequate buddy communication and the supervisor who's really more focused on the research goals than safety, which is, again, you know, we see those competing priorities sometimes. And it's about finding that balance, right?
Wow. That's a really sobering reminder that it's not just about individual responsibility, but it's about the whole system.
It is, yeah.
Like training organizations, the dive operators.
It takes a village, as they say.
Yeah, everyone has to be on board with this.
Absolutely. And it requires, you know, kind of a fundamental shift in mindset, right?
Yeah.
Moving away from just placing blame on an individual, but really trying to understand the context and all of these contributing factors, because it's usually never just one thing, right?
Right.
And it's important to remember, even the most experienced diver can make mistakes.
Yeah.
We're all human.
So how do we actually put this just culture into practice? Because it's a lovely idea.
Yeah.
But it can be tricky, right?
It is. It starts with each of us as individuals, right?
Okay.
Like recognizing that we are all susceptible to these things.
Okay.
To stress, to fatigue.
Right.
To those, you know, brain farts you talked about, right?
Right.
And it's about like creating that space, even within our own dive groups.
Okay.
To be open about mistakes.
Yeah.
To debrief after dives, but not just in a superficial, how was your dive? Great. It's more like, you know, meaningful reflection.
Right. Debriefing. Gareth talks a lot about this in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's so valuable because it's a way for us to really reflect on what went well. What could we have done better? What did we learn from this experience?
So it's more than just like ticking boxes on a checklist.
It's so much more than that.
Like, give me an example. What does a good debrief look like?
Okay, so let's say, for example, you're doing a training exercise and somebody runs out of air.
Okay.
Like that's a big deal.
Right.
So, you know, a good debrief would be like, okay, what were the warning signs? Was this person, you know, breathing really heavily because they were anxious? Were there any communication breakdowns within the team?
Right. And that's where those non-technical skills come in.
Totally.
Right. Being able to communicate when you're stressed.
Yes.
Working as a team.
Being able to make good decisions when things get a little hairy.
Yeah.
It's like having this like mental toolkit for those like, oh crap moments we have underwater.
Right.
And then using that debrief to sharpen those tools, you know.
Right.
To figure out why did we even have to open the toolbox in the first place.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking of communication, I've always found that to be kind of tricky underwater.
Oh, yeah.
Like you've got hand signals, maybe a slate if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you can read it.
Right. And it's not always easy to get your message across.
No.
Especially with like the adrenaline going.
For sure. And in those critical moments, that's where Gareth recommends this framework called SBRR for communication.
Okay, break that down for me. What is SBR?
Okay, so SBR stands for Situation Background Assessment Recommendation.
Okay.
So let's say you're diving with your buddy. You notice that they're blowing through air.
Oh, yeah.
Like really quickly.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, waving your hands frantically.
Right.
You can use SBIR to communicate, like clearly. So you could be like, hey, the situation is I'm seeing you at 100 bar already.
Okay.
The background is, we've only been down for 15 minutes. We're only at, 20 meters.
Right.
My assessment is I'm a little concerned about your air.
Okay.
And then your recommendation is, hey, why don't we go up to 10 meters and see if that helps?
It's such a simple tool.
Yeah.
But it's so effective because it adds that level of structure.
Structure and clarity.
When you're trying to think quickly.
Totally. And don't forget, communication is a two-way street.
Right. It's not just about talking, it's also about listening.
Exactly.
And I can't tell you how many times
I know.
I thought I understood something and then it turns out
nope, I missed it completely.
Yeah.
So how can we be better listeners, especially when you're underwater and you can't stop every 30 seconds and be like, wait, what was that?
Well, I mean, it really starts with, again, being present.
Okay.
Really focusing on what your buddy is saying,
right,
both verbally, non-verbally, paying attention to body language, breathing rate, how they look, are they, do they seem panicked, things like that. And then don't be afraid to use those confirming nods.
Right. Got it.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. It's really about creating that space of trust and open communication.
We're in this together.
We're in this together.
We're looking out for each other.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us into the teamwork piece, right? Right. Teamwork. How do we cultivate that team mentality even when it's just you and your buddy?
Yeah, it's about leveling up from dive buddies to dive team.
Okay.
Right? It's talking about your diving styles.
Okay.
What you're comfortable with, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are.
All right, what your limits are.
Yeah, practicing those key skills like buoyancy control,
right,
emergency procedures. And the more you dive with somebody,
yeah,
you develop that shared awareness, that unspoken communication.
Just clicks.
Yes. And that could be a lifesaver.
For sure. For sure. And it's not about having the same experience level either.
Yeah, not at all.
I've had fantastic dives with people who had hundreds more dives than me.
Right.
Because we talked about things.
Yeah.
We had good communication.
Exactly. You're on the same page.
Yeah, we respected each other's limits.
Yeah, it's about that shared commitment, right?
To safety and just a willingness to work together.
To be a team.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the just culture.
It all connects.
It does.
It all connects. And it's that ongoing conversation, right? Being open about those mistakes, those near misses.
It's how we learn.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, the only real mistake is the one you learn nothing from.
100%.
That feels like a good place to kind of wrap things up.
It does.
For this deep dive.
Remember, diving, it's a privilege.
It is.
Not a right. And with that privilege comes great responsibility.
Words to dive by.
Yes, to ourselves, our buddies, and this amazing underwater world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our listeners, keep learning, keep asking questions.
Keep diving.
And keep diving safely.
Yes, and check out Gareth Locke's book, Under Pressure.
It's a must read. Until next time, dive safe, everyone.